Hello, hello, welcome back. Welcome to the Veterans Radio Podcast. We talk with heroes in action, making it happen for our veteran community. I'm your host, Dali Rivera. And by the way, I want to say Happy New Year. I know it's March 1st, but this is my first time hosting the podcast this year. So I just had to say that. But I want to welcome everybody who's watching us live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, Amazon Live, or wherever else. And of course, our podcast listeners. It means a lot to us that you make time to tune in. And without you, we really wouldn't have a show. And so don't forget to hit that subscribe button and please share the episode right now. And we invite you to please share the comments or post your questions. We'll have some people checking them out. But I'm really excited today because our guest is Eileen Dong, who will be talking to us about human trafficking and other things. So let's get it started. Eileen, let's introduce you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you so much, Dali. I am so excited to be back on the show again. I am Eileen Dawn, Executive Director of Hope Picks Global. We're a nonprofit organization based out of Houston, Texas, but serve survivors and victims of human trafficking from all backgrounds around the country. And additionally, I'm a survivor myself. I sit on various national councils. As a matter of fact, this morning we just had a meeting with my fellow colleagues who are lived experience experts as well to discuss about policies and procedures, particularly regarding victims who are non-American citizens, such as refugees and migrants. And I'm also very excited to share the news that I have been appointed as the Global Goals Ambassador for the United Nations Association. And my SDG, thank you, Dali. My SDG is SDG 16, Peace, Justice, and Strong Institutions. And I am excited and passionate and committed to end human trafficking so that our children can live in a world free from abuse, exploitation.
Yeah, I love the work that you do, and of course, we've spoken about this in the past, and I admire the work that you do. So, aside from being in part of these committees and doing all this amazing work, I also know that you came out with a book. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I'm really excited to share that. As a matter of fact, I have it here right in front of me. Many people ask me, it's called "Thank Your Predator: A Guide to Trauma Recovery from Abuse." And many people say, "Why do you thank your predator?" And some people help me also in my comments say that's actually kind of sort of like intriguing title. But really, the short version, the book itself has three sections. One, it helps who are victims, clearly with the title, to give them the step-by-step guide how they can get through their trauma. Because when I went through that, I documented what are the steps that I took so that they can use it without having to go through the downturns and hit the valleys and fall and get up. And I know that's the nature of the growth and nature of recovery. But if I can by any means help them bring the light and see the hope with their recovering journey, that is all it means. Additionally, I also provide training for law enforcement executives, lawyers, victim services, and government agencies as well as non-government organizations. And the book serves as a training companion. A lot of the times, my trainees will come to me say, "Okay, why don't you, write a book about the details?" Because obviously it's a 45-minute, usually it's the session, sometimes including a 15-minute Q&A, so it's hardly anything. So in the book, it talks about not only just, it has like different chapters, but to give you an example, I put in the charts like, okay, this is the violence and what is in the power and control, what is human trafficking, what is most importantly for them to improve their effectiveness about helping victims. Because a lot of the times the victims has an issue about trust. I recently did a video on Polaris project, if you don't already know, for our audience. And it is the nation's one of the largest networks that combats human trafficking. They provide the human trafficking hotline, the National Human Trafficking Hotline services. And with that, I also share my story about what is going on, and talking about my story that was shared in my book as well. And last but not least, I talked about the 3 sections, and the other section is for the general public. I've listed what is human trafficking just in general. I know that we had recently had the movie Sound of Freedom, and it talked about sex trafficking, but overseas. And I would like to address this. Just remember, human trafficking is something that is happening to us and possibly to our children in our community from the people that are perpetrators from our community. So I cannot emphasize enough how important this is. And this, in the book, it talks about what are the indicators and what are the red flags that you need to look for. And but very importantly, at the back, I have included the resource guide with different information, including the hotline number.
Oh, that's perfect. Because you know what? I've had human trafficking training in the past for, my employer, from my employers and stuff. And one story really sticks out of a woman who shared that when she was a teen, somebody from her church, I guess, pimped her out to a lot of like high class executives and stuff. And her parents never found out ever. And she always came home. So it's not, I think people have a different perception of what human trafficking looks like. They think it's like somebody either locked up in some warehouse or some weird place, or they're on the street. But sometimes it can happen from your own home. So I think that's going to be a very valuable tool. And I know that a lot of people are kind of scared to talk about the topic. So, what would you say to people who are scared to delve into that topic so that they can inform themselves? Because I believe that lack of information is aiding these perpetrators to get away with what they're doing.
I cannot agree more, Dali. Education is key, knowledge is key. And if we don't equip ourselves with the knowledge, then we cannot combat them. And I want you to know that human trafficking is a $150 billion industry. And what that means is I always tell people, I say, okay, I have this box that is, for my glasses, and I can sell it. It doesn't matter. I sell $10, $20, but I can only sell it once. Imagine you sell a human being. You can sell it over and over and over again. And that is really the key. That is how they make the profit. So for people to really understand that, and I know it's a hard topic, and I work with people on a daily basis, and it's still hard for people to talk about. But I want you to understand that this is something particularly. Imagine your children, or maybe you don't have children, but what about your brother or sister? Maybe they have children, or maybe you in your community you have neighbors who have children. And if you equip yourself with the information, whether it is going to our website hopepixglobal.org, or go to my website eileendong.com. I write blogs all the time, or follow me on social media. I'm going to attend the UN Women the following week, actually. This is the 68th Commission on the Status of Women. And this year, we're going to focus on the financial and poverty area, which intersects with the vulnerabilities of how people are getting trafficked. But back to what you're talking about, if you can equip yourself with this knowledge, then you can prevent your loved ones or the loved ones of your loved one from this happening to them.
Eileen, do you have any stats on human trafficking within the military community?
Military community, unfortunately, I don't have the stats, but I can get back to you on that with with the links on the content section. I do want to provide you with the general stats regarding the human trafficking, and I also want to after that I will share with you what is going on in the military community. So according to, as I mentioned, I'm the Global Goals Ambassador. What that stands for is the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them, and the UN has an agenda of 2030 to complete them. I specifically chose to represent SDG 16, which means peace, justice, and strong institutions. And within that, target 16.2 specifically talks about the rule of law of anti-trafficking efforts. And the UN has a lot of different agencies, such as UNODC, the United Nations Office for Drugs and Crimes, that combats human trafficking, the ILO, the International Labor Organization, that combats labor trafficking, UNICEF for children, to give you a few examples. And regarding the stats, there are 108 million people who had been forcibly displaced worldwide by the end of 2022, and nearly 200,000 victims during that time period. And that is a huge number, and we're hoping to diminish that. And back to answer your question, and the stats there, it keeps going. I know that the United States, we recently attended the release for the TIP report, Trafficking in Person, for 2024, and that report will be officially released with the newest stats for the United States. So tune in on my social media. I'll be sharing that as soon as that becomes available. But for the military, I tell people that, it goes both ways. Yesterday, I had an interview with a UNA woman, and they asked me, they said, Eileen, if you want to leave a legacy of combating human trafficking, what it is that you want to say? Okay, let me tell you this: supply and demand. That is just, anyone will understand that. Whether it's, we're talking about human trafficking is so dynamic. In my blog, after watching the Sound of Freedom, that movie, I explain what human trafficking is, and it's not just sex trafficking. We talked about that. It's not just in our in foreign countries. It's in our community, but it's more than labor trafficking, more than sex trafficking. Unfortunately, the United States does not recognize organ trafficking as a form of trafficking, but according to the United Nations and the international rule of law, it is considered one of the forms of trafficking, along with forced marriage, domestic servitude, to list a few. But back to the supply and the demand. If we don't have the demand, then there is no need for the supply. Again, I'm talking about the traffickers who are profit driven. If there's no money to make, then they will not be able to make the profit. Going to how it relates to the military, it goes both ways. That if our soldiers, whether Marine or Air Force or Army, they go to different port. There has been incidences that women, particularly from Southeast Asia, were trafficked to those ports with the fake promise. And remember, there are three things I want you to remember what human trafficking is. It's force, fraud, and coercion. So they made a fake promise, say, okay, I'm gonna send you to, say, America to get this job. And obviously these ports are everywhere, but to get this job, and you will realize your American dream. But in reality, those traffickers withhold their passports, so they cannot really leave. And then they tell them, say, okay, and sometimes it's debt bondage, say, okay, it's gonna cost you $10,000 to get there, but I know you don't have the money to pay me, so you can pay me as you go, as you make the money. So this is where they threat them. Well, you owe me $10,000, so you're gonna do your work until you pay it off. And that's the other way, not to mention the other violences or threats to their family. And so that's like one of the examples that how it relates to the military. And on the other hand, like I said, it goes on both sides. One is, this is the demand side. So if we can cut the demand for our soldiers to say, okay, I need to understand that who are on the other side when it comes to like buying sex. These are the people not willingly. I can't say all prostitution are sex trafficking, but sex trafficking definitely involves prostitution. So we need to be mindful for that. But I've also worked with victims who are veterans. They have been trafficked. And I hate to say that, they have been trafficked from their own colleagues.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely heard stories like that while I served, which is a very unfortunate and, of course, completely unacceptable. But so, do you have any advice if there is somebody out there right now who is in that situation and they want to get out of there? What is there, like a plan of action that they should think through? Because some people think, oh, just call the hotline and that's it. But is there more to it?
I think what you said is so right. We just had a network meeting with all the survivor leaders this week, as a matter of fact. And just calling the hotline doesn't really help. I'm not saying the hotline is doing great work, but
Mm-hmm.
first of all, if you think like you hear say, oh my God, they're holding my passport, I don't have my freedom, and they told me those false promises and everything. So okay, that's a sign. But I myself haven't, been through that kind of situation. I would not just leave because you need to first of all make sure that you're safe. So if
Mm-hmm.
I were you, yes, whether you call the hotline or find a local nonprofit organization that's near you, if you're in Houston, feel free to reach out to us. We'll connect you to the right agency. But connect with the agency and connect with the caseworker. The
Mm-hmm.
first step I would say is to make the safety plan
Mm-hmm.
to find, you have to plan, say, okay, if I leave, are they going to threaten my family? If I leave, do they have my passport? How am I going to get home? And these are all the variables, and not to mention the what I say, the third world problem. Do I have clothes and everything? That's not even in the equation because you're running for life. So
Mm-hmm.
when you make that plan, then the shelters, they're not always available. I
Right.
remember having to float in my book. I talked about having to like float on one person's bed, another person's floor, and sofa because shelters not always available. Make sure that you find one place that is available before you flee.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
yes,
thank you so much for all these tips. We're running out of time, so I want to bring Joe in because he's got a few things to say. But Eileen, thank you so much for all of that information. I really, can you repeat the name of your book one more time, please?
yes, it's called "Thank Your Predator: A Guide to Trauma Recovery from Abuse."
And is that available on Amazon or just on your website?
It is not available on Amazon, but it's so long. So if you search the wrong name, so I would just say go to eileendong.com. You'll see a
Mhm.
link that can take you to Amazon.
Thank you so much, Eileen. We're going to go ahead and bring in Joe. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dali, and thank you, Eileen, for being on the show. And this subject, I mean, you can just, it's like an octopus. It's a huge octopus. And it's like any octopus, doesn't matter which leg you cut, they have 1,000 more that they can survive on. And I, I have the pleasure of knowing Eileen for many years, and your work has exponentially grown to now be part of the United Nations, which is very, very important. And so I just want to thank you for all the things that you do, and uh, and and for sharing the experience, your personal experience, and helping the victims go through and navigate the process. But if I was to pick one thing that I would like to share with you on this few minutes that I have is, I think preparation on the part of the victim is key. And I know in that moment, even for us thinking about consciously and peacefully is hard to do. But I can imagine just being in the victim shoes, and being able to think about strategy to get out, to think about the places. And there is no really safe place, but because we're not talking about business owners who are keeping people captives. We're talking about huge, huge power players, and not just gangs, but also very extremely influential people, as we know, that are part of this. So I agree with you. Just having the one, the 1-800 number, all those is not enough. So, is there any talk within your circles about the actual physical protection of these victims to basically attack and retract the attackers to offer real protection, not in a government agency, because government is government, is not really great. So, but is there groups that actually, as a, and we took this as a female victim, that you can actually call and be protected and defended against these attackers? Is there anything like that?
I must say, Joe, that not at my knowledge at the moment. And this is why, to be honest, why I am acting on high level platforms to be the voice as survivor leaders, to make the changes and be the changes for policy and procedures. But this is such a great point. You touched about not only, because victim, what we are working on is being survivor centered, but there are so many different aspects of survivor
Mm-hmm.
centers, and the protection is key. I must say that myself, and after my speech, a lot of the times people come to me say, "What are some of the improvements that you think law enforcement could improve?" I can list a few, and I have heard a lot of feedbacks. I will certainly include this into my next recommendation at our next meeting.
And I would like to recommend one more thing because I think this is key. We are in a country of laws. So vigilantes are not welcome, that kind of stuff. But we're a country of laws. So unless my suggestion would be to as making the laws change. So having the perpetrators, the people who do this, categorized as enemies of the state, as terrorist groups, that changes the legality of the effect. Now you have the force of the federal government, the FBI, CIA, whatever it is, acting on it, because otherwise it's just someone complaining. And you know what that happens. There's no response that way. So unless the legality of it, the legality of the cause, the legality of the crime is changed, then it will limit what you or anybody else can do. So my suggestion is to change the label of the law to be a crime, international crime, to be a terrorist attack in local or foreign or domestic. And then that will definitely, when you call the FBI, when you call federal agents, they will be obligated to protect the victim. Otherwise, it's a mouse and cat game. And as you notice, and I just stated, there is billions, if not trillions of dollars that people are making on this. And there's a purpose behind it that I'm not aware of. But changing the law is, in my perspective, the first step to making real change. So if someone refuses to change the law, to me, that is telling me that they're in favor of it. That's my perspective.
It is very well said again, Joe. To sort of reiterate about what you just said, I think to give you an update, right now Texas has been one of the leading states, and unfortunately, leading states second to California in terms of the crime of human trafficking. But Texas also had put into law for sex buying as a felony, and that's not enough. I completely agree. And I think you're right that we should include that as whether it's the domestic terrorism or international terrorism.
But keep in mind this too, and that they are punishing the buyer.
Mhm.
They're not punishing the perpetrator. They're not punishing the criminals behind it. And they do the same thing with prostitution. They go and punish the people buying the stuff. If you don't want people to buy stuff, don't sell it. So the crime and the penalty should be punishable on the crime side, not on the citizen side. That is backwards
Yeah,
in
we
my
have a lot of
perspective.
issues. I agree. There's so much more we could talk about. This is definitely a very
Hmm.
good conversation, and I'm sure that Eileen covers a lot of it in her book. But I have to wrap it up now. But Joe, I agree with you. Sometimes the victim is re-victimized by the law, and we really need to change the law. And the only way that we can change
Absolutely,
the law is by working
absolutely.
with people like Eileen, and of course, always speaking up, having your legislators hear what you have to say, because a lot of people don't believe that it works, but believe me, I've written so many people and I always get a response, and not always what you want to hear, but sometimes it is. So I'm just gonna any last words, Eileen, before we go?
Yes, thank you, Dali, and thank you, Joe, again. I want to touch upon really quickly, in the interest of time, legalization of prostitution and decriminalization of trafficking is a huge problem because you're looking at I understand about the victims as well, but what they did not talk about is the sex traffickers. So just to end here, and that's a whole new conversation. But I really urge you, like what Dali said, about educate yourself. If you don't want to bring this upon to yourself, your loved ones, and your children, educate, educate, educate. That is the key. Once you educate yourself, you can equip yourself, and for the people and the children. Like I said, go to our website, go to my website. I can provide the link later. But also, follow on my social media because I post on literally almost every day. Yesterday we had the Geneva Consultation Day about what Geneva is doing, and but today I'm talking with different organizations, and next week I will be at the UN. So stay tuned on that and equip yourself with the knowledge. And last but not least, go volunteer with your local organizations, and if you can, donate with them because we need all of you to fight this trafficking and end it so our children can be free. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Eileen. Yeah, and Joe, thank you also for chiming in. I think that it's definitely great to share all these ideas so that people can, you know, I guess like be bold and share their own too, and or back up, your idea. But so just to recap, today we talked with Eileen Dong. She is the author of "Thank You, Predator: A Guide to Trauma Recovery from Abuse." You can find that on Amazon. And please support this work, the book, and share it with anybody, just to get more education on this topic going, and also to keep yourself and your family safe, because a lot of people think, oh, that would never happen to me, but it happens here in the United States all the time. So that's all the time that we have for today on the Veterans Radio podcast. Tune in next time at 1 p.m., 1:30 p.m. Pacific, 4:30 East Coast. And we want to thank all of you for always tuning in and for your service. Now go ahead and have a wonderful weekend.